A long time ago, on a comics page far, far away. Greetings and welcome to May the Panel Be With You, the Star Wars comic book show brought to you by the Punch Up Entertainment Network. I am your humble host, Mike Gargoni, and joining me, as always, the Guri to my Prince Xizor, it's John Campbell.
Characters that some people know, but are not the beloved characters of Star Wars. But for one brief, shining moment in the mid-90s, man, did they fly.
Well, maybe one of those more than the other. Look,
Yeah.
Prince Xizor, I think we all remember and mispronounce his name a lot. And
Xizor. Is it Xizor?
It's Xizor.
Xizor.
So the XI is pronounced like Chinese, like Xi.
Okay.
And Zor is spelled like Zor, like you would a Zordon.
Up until 5 minutes ago, I was still saying Zizor. So.
And the only reason I know it's pronounced differently is because, well, a lot of reasons, and we'll get into it. But
I would always default to you on the pronunciation of a Star Wars character name, but yes.
Specifically, the PC version of the video game of this story provides a pronunciation, but so does the novel in a slantwise way.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah. Let's start on this whole run. Mike Gargoni has done much more research than I have on this. So
yes. Okay. Let's get into right off the bat. We're hitting the ground running because this is a big start of coverage for us. We're taking a break from the 70s comic. Well, as our current coverage, it's in the 80s, but still started in the 70s. And we're jumping warp speed ahead to a point in time that is both concurrent but also completely separate from when we're talking about, because we're talking about Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah, which if you were any kind of Star Wars fan in the 1990s, that rings a big bell.
Yes, indeed. Now, it takes place, like I said, kind of concurrent with our coverage because it is a story that takes place after Empire Strikes Back, but before Return of the Jedi in Star Wars continuity. But obviously, this story written and produced 20 years after the fact.
Yes, it's a really... This is a very interesting little pocket of Star Wars for a lot of reasons. One of which is, it is kind of, in a way that Star Wars will continue to do, a fill in the blank of you always did kind of wonder what happened in that time. Well, here's the story.
Right, and a lot of people have filled in those gaps over the years, but this, I think, was one of the first huge multimedia pushes in Star Wars after the fact, right?
Well, this is an interesting thing, because we talked, I think, a little bit about this last week when we were setting this up, maybe. That the thing that's this from just going outside of Star Wars, broadening out to just pop culture media in general, was a bizarre thing where they basically, Shadows of the Empire is basically a multimedia push that you would have for tie-ins with a movie, just there's no movie. It's only tie-ins.
Yeah, this seemed like a couple of things, and there's plenty of sources out there. There's whole documentaries about this particular project that can go into more detail about the creation and all the people involved in it, because it was a huge effort between LucasArts and Lucasfilm and Pablo Hidalgo, all those people running the story group. And you also had the people, I believe it was Doubleday, the publishers at the time that were doing a lot of the Star Wars books.
That might be right. Bantam.
And obviously you had Dark Horse was doing comics at the time. You had LucasArts doing a bunch of video games at the time. Topps always at the periphery doing their trading card thing. And all of this conspiracy of publicans coming together to be what if we made a Star Wars without a Star Wars?
Well, because it basically feels like they're going, Star Wars is big business for us, but they're not making any more Star Wars. How do we get new Star Wars products without there being new Star Wars movies? Let's kind of just pretend that there is one, basically. That's the weird thing about this. It's just we're all acting like there's a movie, but there isn't.
Yeah, pretty much even to the extent that there is a soundtrack for this thing.
That is still that is my favorite part of this, is it is a novel that has a score. That's kind of awesome, actually.
And the score was also used in specifically the PC version of the video game. And like, yeah, you can basically like listen along while you're reading the novel and or the comic book, as the case may be.
I mean, that was kind of from what I gathered, that was the design of it, right? It was like it had the sort of, oh, this is this part of the book. Play this when you're reading it a little bit.
Yeah, it didn't quite go as far as like having notes in the liner being like, hey, read this while you're playing this track, kind of a thing.
No, but I mean, but the titles of the tracks, like a movie, you sort of got an idea of where they synced up with the plot.
Yeah, the fact that our main villain here, Prince Xizor, even has like his own theme.
I'm looking at the thing about the novel. The liner notes in the CD gave plot summaries for each track's corresponding section of the novel. So maybe they didn't give you an exact page count, but they would give you like, this section of the book is about this. So this is crazy. I don't believe this was ever attempted before, and I don't think this really is ever, at least not to this extent, been attempted since.
The only thing I can think of that even comes close to this, and again, barely, is Force Unleashed.
Yeah.
And that was like all centered around the video game, right? Mm-hmm. But it had its own novelization. It had its own comic book adaptation. Like there were plenty of toys made from it.
Yeah, and that was firmly in that era when we just knew there weren't going to be more Star Wars movies. So it's sort of just like, I remember that was like, oh, I guess this is kind of the new Star Wars thing.
Yeah, and in this particular case, this was obviously before we had any animated shows like the Clone Wars. So this was in this pocket in the 90s, like I think the two of us have consistently talked about. This was the era of Star Wars that we made our formative Star Wars memories in, because this was when there wasn't any new Star Wars, so this was Star Wars.
Some of us, I'm sure you did as well. I had a Dash Rendar figure. I had a Prince Xizor figure.
I definitely had Xizor. I definitely had... I never had a Dash Rendar, I don't think. Because I conflated Dash Rendar with cable action figures so often.
Sure.
They have the same vest.
Yeah. Well, Dash Rendar is clearly a 90s created Star Wars character. I mean, let's be honest. Like, the 90s hit him hard.
We'll get into Dash Rendar, though not a ton in this comic, which is a little disappointing. Dash Rendar specifically is like the main protagonist of the video game specifically.
Right. He's like given some weight in the novel, and then the central figure of the video game, and then in this he's kind of like over there in the comic.
Yeah.
He's there. Remember Dad?
Yeah, Shadows of the Empire. I mean, like you say, it is this conspiracy to make a Star Wars without a movie. We have all of these different tie-ins, and not least of which is we have this comic book, because as is the focus of this show, we must talk about the Star Wars comic book of it all. And in the 90s, that all came down to Dark Horse Comics.
Indeed. They had it. I mean, for a while as a kid, Dark Horse was the place to go for all the site, right? Like when I was a kid in the 90s, it was Star Wars, Alien, Predator. They also had RoboCop, like it was like that was what they were. And then you're like, oh, wait, they also make this thing called Hellboy? Like, or Grendel or whatever,
Well, and obviously we're maybe a little bit biased because as Portland, Oregon natives, like Dark Horse is our backyard comic book company, right?
Yeah, the comic book shop I went to was across the street from the Dark Horse offices. So, it was it was right there. So, it was very attainable. You're like, oh, they make them over there.
Yeah. You see that window with the big xenomorph in it? Yeah, it's over there. That's where they make the comic books.
We also got the benefit of our... I think one of the reasons we grew up as Dark Horse kids, too, was the town we grew up in. Our library got all the Dark Horse books because Dark Horse would just give them to them.
Right, yeah, totally.
But I read everything Dark Horse published in the 90s,
Absolutely.
90s and the early 2000s. Huge, yeah.
So just for a little bit of context at this time, we're in this era in which the Marvel isn't anything to Star Wars, basically. And that won't be the case until the mid-2000s when Disney buys Marvel, Disney buys Star Wars, and that whole thing happens.
Right.
Right now, Star Wars is a little bit in the wilderness. There are no movies being made, though, like in retrospect, we know that there are movies in the pipeline at this point.
About this just before we started recording here, that I think this a little bit, and then even more so the re-releases in 97 were kind of the like, George wants to make more, but we kind of, I mean, it seems ridiculous now, but it is interesting at the time. It was sort of like, do people still like Star Wars? Is there a market? It was sort of them testing the market, going, we're going to do this initiative, sort of media tie-in thing. Then we're going to put the movies back. Okay, those made money. Yeah, George feels more confident about making the prequels. So there were some rumblings about like, maybe I want to do something with the franchise, you know. I remember do you remember the interviews he did on the VHS releases around this time? At the front of those, the black boxed Star Wars tapes. Before we had the gold ones of the special
The gold
edition.
ones were the special edition, yeah.
Yeah, but the black box ones that had the cool thing with just the like half a Vader mask or half a Stormtrooper helmet.
Mm-hmm.
That set, because, you know, by God, we've given them enough money. I've owned every single release of these movies ever. But I remember in those little he did like little 10-minute interviews back in the day when that was what you got at the front of the tape. You got a little George.
That was the bonus feature.
Yeah, but I remember in those him talking about like, well, someday I'd love to do the story of the downfall of Anakin Skywalker, you know, and it's sort of like, and that was just as a kid being like, ooh, yeah, are you gonna do that? Oh, maybe I'm thinking about it, you know. So that was kind of where we were in 1996. Was him going, maybe I'd like to tell the Darth Vader story at some point, maybe.
Well, hold on, because first he's got to revolutionize how films are made and the sounds in theaters across America for that to work.
That was the big thing on those two. I do remember that on those same tapes. It was like, but what I really want to talk about is THX sound. And we had just gotten, my dad was very excited about, we had just gotten a surround sound system, which was a lot of placing of speakers and eventually a give up on it because the room we had, our living room, wasn't exactly built for. But it was a lot of my dad going, if I put it here, see, it sounds like it's behind. That X-Wing is coming from behind you, you know? Yeah.
So, we have ourselves here, Shadows of the Empire, a comic book that is not entirely an adaptation of the Star Wars movie that doesn't exist at the center of all this. I guess for simplification's purposes, we really should just consider the novel as the central story here.
That is the thing. Everything is cribbing from the novel. That the novel basically is taking the place of the movie.
Basically, yes. Because while there was a lot of crossover between the creative people involved in this, there is also a lot of, well, what else can we eke out of this story environment that we're creating? So you have our creative team here, which we will see through all 6 of these issues, but this particular comic was written by John Wagner, who is a name we'll talk about more as we talk about Dark Horse Star Wars comics.
Big Dark Horse guy and did a lot of Star Wars.
Killian Plunkett is doing our pencils here. Again, Dark Horse alum. I think Judge Dredd Batman crossover was like one of his big breakouts.
I think also written by John Wagner, yes.
We got inks by P. Craig Russell.
P. Craig was a guy we've talked about a lot.
Yeah. Colors by Carrie Porter, color separations by Heroic Age Colors, letters by Dave Cooper, and covers by Hugh Fleming all the way through. Hugh Fleming we've talked about before, just most recently on our Splinter of the Mind's Eye coverage. We are always very complimentary about the covers, if nothing else.
Oh, God. Well, Hugh Fleming, I was talking about this beforehand. I'm a huge fan of Drew Struzan, who did all the original Star Wars movie posters and the Indiana Jones movie posters, Back to the Future. Basically, every movie you loved as a kid, Drew Struzan did the awesome painted poster for. And I feel like Hugh Fleming is very much doing in the Struzan mold. And that leads me to Struzan did the cover for the novel, which, once again, is sort of the central thing. We should also mention the name Steve Perry, because he's the guy who wrote the novel.
He is the guy who wrote the novel, and he is they don't list it in the credits in the book, but he definitely is a consultant here because stuff from the novel has to at least like minorly line up with the stuff in this book.
Well, he's the guy Lucasfilm and Bantam brought in to be sort of the architect of this whole thing.
And he is definitely the one guiding a lot of this. Obviously, you're going to have the biggest differentiation in the story when you deal with a video game. So the video game definitely takes some liberties just in terms of being able to play a video game.
Right. I mean, yeah, as we talked about, they basically create an entire character to be the main character of the video games.
Yeah. Oh, Dash Rendar. We'll get to him when we get to him.
Well,
he's right there on the cover, though.
He sure is. He also very much was like, we don't have a Han Solo. We need somebody to say Han Solo stuff.
Let's bring up this cover here and talk a little bit about this. Because this is just, it's a rad, look, it's Star Wars.
It's pure Star Wars.
There might be some characters on here you don't recognize, but there's enough here that you immediately go, oh, it's a Star Wars.
Oh, you got Luke Skywalker front and center with his lightsaber that he doesn't have at this point in the story.
That's true, but a big part of the novel is him like slowly building that lightsaber.
Eventually he will. Yeah, like a lot of comics covers, this is not necessarily representative of this issue's plot.
I would say it's actually disingenuous about this issue's plot.
Well, here's the whole thing that we need to talk about with this comic, of course, as well, is there is nothing to indicate that you're not reading an adaptation of the novel, which I do remember thinking this was going to be when I first read it, back in the day when I got the comic. I was like, oh, cool, the comic adaptation. This is once again, like if the book is the movie, this is the side plot. This is the adding more onto.
Yes, there is some crossover, and I'll point because I'm also rereading the novel and I've watched playthroughs of the video game, and I've gone a little too deep on this.
Gorgoni's lost in the shadows,
I can point out exactly where it's been crossing over and where it deviates. So as we get through it, I'll point those bits out. But it is interesting to see this as a representation of this larger story, but with a focus on things that are so specific to Dark Horse Comics when we think about them in terms of Star Wars. For a little bit of context, Dark Horse never really had a ton of ongoing books in the Star Wars franchise, though one of the big one during this era that you and I are both fans of is, of course, the Rogue Squadron series.
Love our Wedge Antilles and the Rogue Squadron.
And they'll get some love in this book, you best believe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But there's also plenty of little side stories to be told with Boba Fett, though I think probably the best Boba Fett books don't come until after this.
But this, I will say, reading this, you're like, oh, God, yeah, Dark Horse loves the bounty hunters is very clear when you read this.
Oh, yeah. No, and there's a lot of love given to those bounty hunters in the video game as well.
That makes sense.
But yeah, let's get into this because, right off the bat, for those who don't recognize some of these characters and those watching on YouTube, top left there, that's Prince Xizor. He's a really sexy lizard man.
He is basically they wanted to create a new Star Wars villain within this to be sort of the central antagonist of this story because they knew that by setting it between the two, you had to keep Vader somewhat isolated. He couldn't be the main threat. He's around. He's there.
Oh, totally.
Him and the Emperor, but their story is already set where that's going. So you need a wild card antagonist for this.
And we also need a wild card protagonist, and that's why in the bottom right corner of this cover, we got our very own Dash Rendar.
Yeah, who is, and I'm reading through research on this and stuff, what little research I did. It oft mocked as Bobo Han Solo.
Look, what if Snake Plissken and Cable from the X-Men had a baby? It would be Dash Rendar.
By choosing to set this between Empire and Jedi, you have eliminated your rogue renegade character, and they needed somebody to fill that slot.
But it's also 1996, so by the very nature of his creation being in that time frame, we are left with a poochification of Han Solo.
Gorgoni, he's totally in my face.
Look, if Dash Rendar isn't on the page, the people should be asking, where is Dash Rendar?
Yeah, and I think that does kind of happen in this comic a little bit. Everyone's asking, where's Dash Rendar? Yeah, it was just kind of, and like I said, I had the action figure of him because he was the character aimed at me, where I was like, where's my Han Solo? yeah, Jedis are cool and stuff, but where's like a badass with a gun?
To the point where some little bits and pieces of Shadows of the Empire have been reintroduced into Star Wars canon since the Disney takeover.
This isn't canon anymore, right?
100% it's not.
Yeah. But it was, of course, at the time, because what even was canon when they weren't making,
Canon was everything that wasn't in the movies.
Right. Basically. Yeah. Anything. Yeah. It was just like there was nothing to refute any of this being canon. So it's not that it was canon. It's just what was there to question any of it.
Like Black Sun and the Faline, which is Jizor's race, have been reintroduced, though Prince Jizor himself has never been name dropped in Star Wars since the Disney takeover.
That's probably okay.
And Dash Rendar gets like a mention in one of the more recent novels, and that's pretty much it.
I think is it just in one of the novels? I feel like he came up in a comic too,
maybe one that I haven't read, but at least I know that there is in the Solo tie-in novel. I was like, well, you've got Dash Rendar here. Why would you need Han Solo?
Yeah. There you go. And the way he's introduced in this is like, he's just like he was another guy at the Battle of Hoth.
Yeah, and that's given some lip service in the novel as well, and it's a whole level in the video game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was looking at what just the levels of the video game were. But I like that this is like, that's easy because, like, there were a lot of people at the Battle of Hoth. So you're like, oh, yeah, he was over there. Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, did nothing to refute that.
So we got our credits page here. We got our lovely timeline that we've talked about before.
And the super important timeline that definitely has not been completely erased.
It's erased right up until it isn't, right?
Yep. No. All right. Long time ago in a galaxy.
Long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We got our opening crawl. Ultimate victory.
All right.
So, fun fact about I'm going to be littering this whole coverage with fun facts about Shadows of the Empire, I feel like.
Oh, that's what I expect, man. You are the little editor's notes on this.
In the video game version, we have our John Williams, like, swelling score.
Who had nothing to do, by the way, we should say, of course not, with the
zero to do. Yeah, of course. No. They're just
they wouldn't even waste that phone call.
The opening crawl is timed such, though, that it lasts longer than the opening crawl music. So there's just this weird dead space when the opening crawl is finishing in the video game.
I love it. I remember that kind of thing in a lot of the video games of this era. It was just like, you just nope. All right, no, never mind. We're not going to go back and fill it in. Should mention real quick, though, about the score. Joel McNeely was the composer for the score, who also did the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles TV show. So this guy's career was just doing offshoots of John Williams stuff.
Good work if you can get it.
Yeah. I mean, nothing wrong with any of the work I've seen.
But let's get into the opening crawl here for Shadows of the Empire, the comic book. Ultimate victory lies within the grasp of the dreaded Galactic Emperor Palpatine, as the tattered remains of the rebel fleet desperately seek sanctuary and time to muster new allies. A grim Luke Skywalker, reeling from Darth Vader's revelation on the Cloud City of Bespin. Well, Bespin's the planet, Cloud City is on Bespin. Anyway, ponders his own destiny and that of the Rebel Alliance. Meanwhile, the search ensues for Han Solo, captive of the notorious bounty hunter, Boba Fett. Remember that name, Boba Fett. He's super cool. We all love Boba Fett.
You love him. It is almost looks like Boba Fett. Pause for applause. Yeah.
To deal a final blow to the rebellion, Palpatine has hatched a new plan of which even Lord Vader is unaware. To aid him, the Emperor has enlisted the services of the vast criminal underworld that lurks within the shadows of the Empire.
Hey, that's the name of the book.
They said the thing.
Yeah.
Interesting that this opening crawl sort of spoils something that isn't revealed until like near the end of the novel, which is that Palpatine's kind of pulling the strings behind all of this, which of course he is.
Well, yeah. Here's my barometer now, though, for Star Wars crawls. Does it start with the dead speak? If not, we're good.
If not, we're good.
All right.
Is a central plot point revealed in the video game Fortnite? No? Great. Let's move forward.
I can't. I'm still mad. All right, moving on. Are you fucking kidding me? All right.
Yeah, we pick up with Luke and Leia. They're aboard a spaceship here. They're with the Rebel Armada as they're cruising through space.
I gotta say, right off the bat, okay, the pencils on this are very reminiscent of this era, and I will say, reading them now, I don't love them.
Yeah,
they're not god awful, but they're weird.
They're serviceable, is what I will say.
Yeah, it does feel like, really? This is like, unlike the Infantino stuff we normally talk about, you're going like, yeah, they look like the likenesses of the actors. But you're just going like, this was the best you could do? Okay, all right, it's fine.
I feel like there's something indicative of 90s art specifically that is, we're not quite to the like surrealist stuff and like the Kirby influences of the 70s and 80s. We're moving away from that, right? Mm-hmm. But we're not quite to like some of the almost too realistic stuff when you get into like Greg Land and stuff later in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And obviously that's way too far in the other direction. But
Jim Lee, Brian Hitch, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously there are artists who will like find their niche in this era. Like your Liefelds will like take this and run with it to an almost absurd extent.
Oh, well, we're firmly in the 96. We're in the Image Comics revolution. You know?
Totally.
So, yeah, we're looking at those guys. The other thing I got to say, I think some of it is the colors, too. They're just so bright. There's not a lot of shaping of it. It feels just BAM!
Yeah, it's a little like flat colors of just like, well, Luke's tunic is white and Leia wears the white robes. So those are bright white. There's
not a lot of thought about like the lighting of a space and stuff in here.
No, it's the inside, so everything's lit up. There are no shadows.
Bam! That's my take on the lighting. All right. Anyway, I mean, it's not terrible. It's just like you just go like, oh, okay.
Serviceable is the word I would use.
Yeah, serviceable is exactly. And I think that was, I'll say this across the board, kind of a problem with Dark Horse. I don't feel like they always gave Star Wars. I don't think they were always a great caretaker of Star Wars.
I mean, I will say this: I wasn't super heartbroken when they lost the license to it when Disney took over.
Because a lot of it was and this is the problem with Dark Horse. Maybe Mike Richardson likes to give jobs to his friends, whether they're the best people for the job to begin with.
And look, I think the people who got put on this book were doing the best they could. Obviously, they were working within a time frame, and they needed to appease the overlords at Lucasfilm.
This is no one's vision. I mean, this is not like, man, finally I get to tell my Star Wars story. That also, I think, hurts this as well. We were ordered to do this,
But also, there are certain mandates within Dark Horse about like what this story, even as part of Shadows of the Empire, needs to entail. Because right off the bat, we are thrown into, an Imperial ship has found the Rebel fleet.
Mm-hmm.
We're diverting to intercept.
Who's this guy they're talking to?
Beardface? Don't know.
I know, yeah. But they act like, oh, yeah, it's that famous captain of the Rebel. Okay.
Because we cut to this next page, and Luke and Leia are basically in this position where Leia has to say, hold on, Luke, we can't be the main characters of this. Slow down.
Whoa, cool it, yeah. I will say, though, I like acknowledging that Luke is having trouble with his robot hand and isn't just like, I love you, you're better than my real hand.
Though he is crushing a table with it, which I found disconcerting.
It's powerful, but he doesn't know how to control it, which, makes it a little scary.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, R2 and 3PO are here, and they're getting some jibes in at each other.
They have to be. It's in their contracts.
Mm-hmm.
The banter between them is something here.
As R2 says, bleep, 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 bleeple. Yeah. And we have a rejoinder from 3PO.
Where, wait, which page are we on?
There you are. R2-D2 says your X-Wing is in the service bay for refit. I trust that settles the matter, as they're all trying to convince Luke not to go join the space fight.
Yeah. Later is there's another later exchange between R2 and 3PO that is nuts. And yeah, and Leia just being like, Luke, calm down, and Luke looking at him, my fucking monster's hand. I want to bust out an "I'm a monster" from Arrested Development.
But Leia's reassuring Luke, being like, hey, don't worry about it. We're in a comic book. That means we have this whole fleet of people who are main characters of a different book who can take care of the situation.
This felt so Dark Horse, where it's like, you rest, Luke. All in caps and bolded. Wedge Antilles and Rogue Squadron are with us.
Yeah, a break for applause.
Wedge Antilles.
Because, we cut right out to, hey, it's Wedge and Rogue Squadron. We love those guys.
We sure do. And a lot of this is just like, hey, up front, let's see all the characters you love, because they're not really going to be the center of this story.
No, Wedge and Rogue Squadron are in the novel, but they show up in a very supporting role. I will say this particular chunk of story takes place before the novel even starts.
Well, because this comic, like we're talking about, it's not an adaptation, but it still can't assume people are reading the novel necessarily. Mm-hmm. So they have to do some kind of like, all right, let's kind of give people context for what's happening here.
Yeah, and at this point, the context we have is they're running away from the end of Empire Strikes Back. Uh-oh, there's Imperials. Go get them, Rogue Squadron.
Yeah, which to be fair, I do say that all the time, though. Go get them, Rogue Squadron. Regardless of circumstance.
Because we've got this little Imperial ship that's got just a tiny little TIE fighter escort. They seem to have just bumbled into the Rebel Alliance, and now the Rebels are making sure they can't get a message out and don't get away.
They launched 9 TIE fighters, they say here.
Mm-hmm.
And then send a message to Lord Vader. And oh boy, the way this guy's chin is melting to his neck on the next page, this Imperial officer.
Yeah. Look, he is just preemptively guarding his neck from the angry message he's about to get from Vader, right?
I've been doing my neck exercises so Lord Vader can't choke me.
Unfortunately for the Imperials, they're being jammed by the rebellion. And then Rogue Squadron swoops in and blows everybody up.
Look at all that fire in space. That's crazy.
You're never going to let that go.
Nope. Because it's one of the it's just like, all right, well, you have no credence for your argument. Great. It completely exposes the pointlessness of those people. Anywho. So yes, they blow up a bunch of stuff. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, look, I always like seeing X-Wings swoop around blowing up TIE fighters. That's just a universal fact.
Yeah, it's great. It's sending those rotten Imperial bastards right to hell where they belong.
I will say on this next page we've got Wedge saying, "Stay focused, boys, because killed by friendly fire is a contradiction in terms."
Mm-hmm.
I can't really parse that. Can you make heads or tails of that sentence?
I read it a few times last night trying to understand what the hell he was talking about.
Yeah. And it's interesting. The reason I bring it up is because there is the plot point later that is in the comic briefly and is more focused on in the novel, in which a rebel pilot's R2 unit goes berserk and tries to kill Luke.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is like a friendly fire situation, though it's obviously sabotage that did it. So like I thought this was maybe foreshadowing, but it's not, and I don't know.
I don't know either. It really is. Like I said, I read it and just kept going. Friendly fire. Okay. Why is he saying that?
Obviously,
I was trying to see, is there friendly fire? No.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
He's telling, like, guys, don't shoot each other because friendly fire is bad, is basically.
Yeah, and which, like,
that's
okay,
weird.
Wedge, yeah, we got that.
It's like, Wedge, we weren't going to shoot each other, though. Why are you saying that?
Yeah, I don't know. But
it's a weird placement of that line, for sure. But anyway.
It reads like it's supposed to be a clever, like, haha, we did it line, but then it just makes you stop and think about it too much.
Stay focused, boys, because killed by friendly fire is a contradiction in terms. It's kind of, I think, the way it's supposed to be like a toss-off, like, all right, gentlemen, I'm your leader, so blah, 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 but you're like, Wait, what? What did he say?
Yeah, but
Say that?
like, especially with the explosions behind the X-wings, I expect us to be like, all right, boys, mop them up. Let's clean up this shit
Yeah.
show.
I want to cut. I want to be the guy in the cockpit of X-wing going, the fuck did he just? Was that weird? Am I the only one who thought that was pretty weird that Wedge said that?
Come again, Rogue Leader?
But anyway, we're right back into the action. We turn the page because Rogue 3, you got double trouble on your tail.
Uh-oh, see, that's the line I expect.
Yeah, this is all, everything else. That's why that stands out, because everything else is just classic X-Wing banter and stuff. I'm hit. I got him. Good shooting, too. Rogue 3 report. I will say, though, this does do a thing I can't stand, which is tons of the dialogue is just over ships, and I can't figure out who's talking a lot of the time.
Well, because it's Rogue's leader through 9, right?
Yeah.
And who those people are is irrelevant to this book.
To this book, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But please, by all means, buy the new issue of Rogue Squadron from Dark Horse.
Well, look, then you can learn the difference between a Bix and a Wedge, but until then...
Until then, they're just guys who pilot ships.
Yeah. Only one of which has a name in this book.
Correct.
For now.
And so, but anyway, they're good shooting, boys.
I love the line from the rebel officer on the bridge here being like, those rogues can mix it up. I'd buy a comic book based on them.
Not even mix it up. Just mix it. Those rogues can mix it.
We get an awesome spider guy as one of the rebel officers here. I love this guy.
I want more of this guy. I love this guy. This guy's right on his job, too. I like it. He's a pro.
For those not reading along with us on YouTube, he's standing in front of one of those big clear boards that you see sometimes in like the rebellion headquarters scenes in Star Wars that are always like, I guess those are radar or something.
Yeah, I guess so. They need something to point at in scenes.
Yeah, but if you got 6 arms, you got all sorts of things to point at.
But I love he's a flesh-colored spider guy.
Yeah, the flesh-colored kind of is off-putting, isn't it?
A little weird. But he's on his job, and then beard face who is just appears in this to be just a really bearded Luke Skywalker based on this design.
But he's running for it, and so this Imperial cruiser's running, but that's fine. We got Rogue Squadron. They'll take care of it.
Yep. Because those boys can mix it.
Because, what's this? They're firing at the rear, but the deflectors are too strong, but it's a good thing that good old Commander Wedge Antilles has got Rogue 5 waiting in the wings.
Pew, 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 pew. And then, vadoom, that thing goes up.
As I always say, it pays to play at deep safety.
God, Wedge has so many, one-liners in this.
Also, is that an American football reference?
I did also. That struck me last night reading it. I was like, okay. Back when I was playing left tackle in the, I remember my college ball days. What?
Yeah, look.
Wedge is drunk out here, man.
Wedge just can't let go of the old college ball days.
Yeah, it's like, oh, God, he shows up to, events with all the Luke and stuff, and it's like, he's going to talk about the championship game again, isn't he? All right.
He doesn't wear the championship ring until he's with everyone else. You know that, right?
We were 4th and goal. 2 minutes. Down to 5 seconds. I said, give me the ball. And it's like, oh, fucking Wedge. God damn it. Yeah. Can't stand this guy. All right. So bring your boys in, though. Rogue Squadron's done their work.
Good job. You should go buy their comic. Meanwhile...
Yeah. We're out of here, everyone.
Back to our main characters.
Back to bearded Luke Skywalker, whoever this guy is. Did I even say his name?
Oh, he's one of the rebel commanders who's on Hoth. I forget his name.
Yeah, the drawing of him though.
Is that Riken?
Oh, it could be. Did they say his name earlier?
No, they don't.
Then it doesn't matter. Like I said, the way he's drawn is just Luke with a big beard.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he's giving an update to Princess Leia, and he goes, hey, I know you want to go to Tatooine because that's where Han Solo is, right?
Yeah.
And
that's where they think Han Solo is.
Yeah, well, the fact that they made a big deal about everybody knows Jabba's the one who wants him, and Jabba's on Tatooine. It's a safe bet.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, my biggest complaint about Shadows of the Empire, and maybe this era of Star Wars storytelling in general, because I think the current Marvel stuff is also guilty of this, is people bending over backwards to delay Han Solo's frozen carbonite form from getting to Jabba the Hutt.
It is a big problem when you set things in this era that you're like, logically, Return of the Jet, yeah, it's like, because you're just going like, okay, well, I always just assume Boba Fett took him right to Jabba. I have no reason to think otherwise. But these comics and stuff can't resist.
Oh, and then, no, absolutely.
And then the problem is like, okay, if it's like, was this like roughly a year-ish?
It's like 6 months.
Yeah, but it's just like, okay, but the other problem then is like, how all that time passes, and they know where Han is.
Yeah, and in the movie, you can sort of write it off as like, okay, Chewie and Lando are infiltrating Jabba's palace, and like it took time for Lando to get into a position to try to pull this off.
That's all fine until you start giving them other stuff to do in that time, and then and then you end up in the problem we're having right now in the 70s comic or the 80s comic that we normally cover, which is it's always just like, sorry boys, got to pull you back again. I know you were just about to save Han Solo, but if you could just come back and do this for us, and you're just like, oh my god. This is actually in some ways maybe the worst gap of time to set stories in at least for the core like Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewie.
Yeah. I think there's plenty of interesting stories to tell in this gap, but
sure, but it's just like, yeah, their focus would be we got to get Han Solo back, and when they deviate from that, you're like, I am kind of getting to, everyone should be asking, where's Han Solo?
So we've got this inner monologue from Leia as she's thinking about Han Solo and her feelings for him, and how she also sort of has feelings for Luke, but they're feelings in a different way.
Yeah, because now this is the big difference reading this, of course, from what we've been reading is like, oh, now we do have the full context of all this stuff. This is the weird 3PO R2 exchange. So let me go through this weird exchange here because
this back and forth is happening while Leia's having her inner monologue.
Yeah, and it's really weird. I mean, let's say, I'm sure you didn't properly fix my leg, R2. I keep getting this unnatural urge to kick myself.
Bleep, 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 bleep.
Yeah. What do you mean there's nothing unnatural about it?
Woo, bzzzt.
Why, R2, I'm deeply hurt. Wow. R2 cold-blooded, man.
So Leia's beginning to suspect that something happened between Luke and Darth Vader.
Yeah.
No shit.
What happened? Yeah. I can't help wondering if something happened. Something's not telling us. Anyway, cut to Vader.
Cut to, Vader on a Super Star Destroyer. He's got a call from the Emperor.
I do love the Emperor head. Just charging through the bridge or whatever. That's cool.
Yeah, and I also like the Imperial officers being like, oh, fuck.
And everybody, the fact that the way that's designed, so this guy just keep pushing buttons, don't wait. And then you got another guy looking up at him, almost like, I shouldn't have, man, I looked right up at him.
Yeah, first mistake, looking at Vader.
But I do love the idea that like the way the bridge is, like all the officers are down here and they're looking up like, oh, Vader's coming, baby. And then the giant Emperor hologram, which is already on when Vader enters the room, which is it's a power move. Your failure on Bespin distresses me, Vader.
Luke Skywalker's escape was unfortunate, but not fatal. I have sown the seeds of ambition in his mind. Rest assured, he will be ours.
Yeah, I do like some of the coloring on this. I like the way the light is glinting off of his helmet and stuff. But it's still a little too bright. It needs a little bit more atmosphere to it, but, you know.
So, another Shadows of the Empire fun fact.
Yes.
This scene is not in the novel, but the novel does open with, from Gizor's perspective, him listening to the conversation between the Emperor and Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
So the whole, like, but what if he could be turned?
Yeah.
Yes, a powerful ally he would make. Like, that whole exchange is overheard by Prince Xizor at the, like, very beginning of the novel.
Makes sense.
So it sort of starts this whole cat and mouse game that Vader and Xizor have with each other in terms of, like, why they're sniping at each other for the Emperor's favor.
It's basically what's happening in this scene is just like, I don't know, I'm giving you a lot of leash on this one, Vader.
Yeah, we get this whole exchange between Vader and Palpatine. Palpatine being like, were I to judge you by your deeds rather than your words, Vader, I would be forced to conclude you do not wish to ensnare Skywalker.
I just like this guy. Oh, well, he's coming in here talking a big game. I don't see it out there on the field. You know where on the field, I'll tell you that. That guy, he rushed. Do you have any idea what he's... Yeah,
Look, it was fourth quarter. They were fourth and down. They just needed to hand wedge the ball, and he got it done, okay?
I've got a tape of it somewhere. I'll send it to you.
I have a replica of his jersey. It was great.
Yeah, that guy was great in the clutch. That's all I'm saying.
All right, Vader, be a wedge.
Yeah, that's right. You know I love my college ball. I would if Emperor's like, all right, that's enough of that. It's almost the game's gonna be on in a little bit.
I only watch college ball because I think it preserves the sportsmanship. There's not a lot of it.
I don't like when the money gets involved. You know, everything gets very corrupt, and you know I hate corruption, famously. Yeah, and so basically he's like, yeah, but in the meantime, you got to go to Coruscant because we're building a bunch of ships with this guy, Xizor. And I just like the Vader's like, I fucking hate that guy.
Yeah, Vader, Xizor, do you think it is wise to involve him in the project? You know, that project we've got on Endor, the project. Wonder what it could be.
There's one thing later in here. Yeah, I think, is it in here? There's some point where they're talking, they go, the Endor project. I'm not going to say what it is. But Vader's concerned about his ties to Black Sun. Gorgoni, tell us about what Black Sun is, because it does still exist in canon, loosely, but hasn't it kind of been replaced by Crimson Dawn?
Yes and no. So Black Sun is one of many crime syndicates in the Star Wars canon. And Black Sun still exists. You can actually see them, not to any like real character development extent, but they are a decent part of the whole like Darth Maul taking over the underworld arc in the later seasons of the Clone Wars. You've got Black Sun, you've got the Pikes, Crimson Dawn. The Hutts are obviously the one that's been the biggest for the longest, probably.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Crimson Dawn, I feel like just gets the most lip service these days, though.
Yeah, because it's the one that got taken over by Darth Maul, and that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, Kira, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, I think the fact that they were a major plot point in a huge release movie gives that indication, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Black Sun's even mentioned in that movie as just like another of the syndicates.
Well, yeah, because there are, like with anything in crime stuff, there are different factions and organizations, obviously.
Yeah, and those... exactly how big those factions are and how important they are in the galaxy changes from era to era of Star Wars, both in canon and just in terms of how they're written. Like in this era, the Hutt cartels aren't really given the same amount of lip service as they are later. To the point where it's almost like Jabba is used as sort of a cat's paw in this book in a way that like he would never really be functionally used if he was being written today.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's just sort of like, oh, that Jabba guy. Am I right?
Yeah, but yeah, Black Sun, at least for the purposes of Shadows of the Empire, is the biggest, baddest crime syndicate out there, and the head of it is Prince Xizor, this really sexy lizard man.
Well, and Black Sun gets a lot of weight when you've got Vader being like, "Do we really want to work with those guys?" You're like, "Oh man, Vader looks down on like Black Sun." It's just like, yeah, but those guys are crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. A difference between the novel and here is in the novel, it seems pretty clear that like the Emperor and Vader are like very aware that Jizor runs Black Sun, and they don't really make any secret about it, at least amongst themselves.
Whereas here, the Emperor has the kind of strange line of, "Do not concern yourself with schoolboy rumors."
Yeah. And again, the fact that the Emperor is pulling everyone's strings, so... And he maybe says that more to the point because as we pull back from this conversation, we see that Prince Jizor himself is overhearing this whole conversation.
Yeah.
And he's in the room with the Emperor. But
Yeah,
Vader
exactly.
is unaware of that.
It's a cool reveal. I do like the way that it pulls out to above the hologram, and then there's Jizor, and of course the Imperial Guard is there.
Yeah, and here's where this book gets real wiggy, at least in terms of like how it presents Jizor as a character versus who knows what information and how relevant it is to the characters involved. So we have Jizor here saying some catty comments about Vader.
By the way, all of his dialogue is catty. I think.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That Vader, am I right?
I don't know where this guy's voice lands. In the video game, he is voiced specifically by, what's the actor's name? Like, the video game has all the, like, voice actors you expect from the era.
I'm looking at I have the video game thing open right now.
But Nick Tate plays Jizor in the video game. And he's, like, one of those faces you'd recognize as, like, oh, he's been in, like, every TV show for a couple of episodes.
Yeah. Long, working character actor.
But he gives Jizor kind of like, and I will rule the galaxy, bwahaha, kind of voice.
Interesting, that's interesting because I read him a little bit more posh.
Yeah, and he definitely reads that way in the book too.
Kind of read him a little British, right? Sort of like, hope his judgment is not impaired by his emotions, his hatred of me, his love for his son. Like, sort of just like, oh, like, because everything with him is just like, well, I hope nothing bad happens. Like, he just sort of has this like,
He's a Bond villain, right?
Yes, that's very much how I read him. Just like above it all, just like he's got the stuff that Vader is so blunt. This guy is much more like, pleasure doing business with you. Sort of like,
right.
Good evening, Mr. Bond. Yeah, Mr. Skywalker.
Well, and like, there's a whole chunk of a chapter in the book describing how, like, there's a restaurant at the very center of Coruscant that always keeps a table open for him, and the last manager who didn't keep that table open for him died mysteriously.
He's a prince, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, there's a class to this guy. The way he presents himself, the robes. I mean, let's be honest. He's got a little Ming the Merciless vibe to him.
Totally.
That
line you just read is where the confusion starts to set in. This guy knows that Vader is the father of Luke Skywalker.
That definitely opens up into like, how many people know this? Because like,
and he's saying this in front of these two Imperial guards, and you see behind him a bunch of stormtroopers.
Yeah. Oh, great! Now I'm gonna have to kill all these guys because you said that. Fuck. That one guy was a college football star. You know how that's gonna break my heart.
Because on this next page we see that they're in like the Imperial throne room, surrounded by stormtroopers, just kind of standing there.
These guys up on the little platforms.
Oh, that's the worst duty.
Yeah, I just stand up here all day. I have to.
Ugh, I've got platform duty again. Yeesh.
God, I'm gonna have to listen to the Emperor watch his old college games. Go, yes, first down.
At least the guys on the floor can get swapped out and go to the bathroom sometimes. You get up on the platform, you're there all day.
Yeah, because he's gonna know. So he's like, hold on, platform 3 looks pretty empty to me. And what are these guys doing? What do you need the guys on the fucking platforms for?
Yeah, like, okay, red-robed Imperial guards, I get that. They're standing there.
All the time. That's Secret Service duty, like
Yeah.
But these guys, these are purely for show, right?
I mean, they're just there to make Jizor, like, slightly nervous, I guess.
Yeah. Look at what I made all these guys do. That's right. He's got to stand up all there all day until I tell him he can go home.
But we have basically Jizor being like, Oh, as you say, Emperor. Of course, Emperor. I will do everything you say, Emperor.
And of course, his whole thing is like, and then as soon as we walk out of there, we've got his another beloved character, so beloved she gets her own comic sequel to this.
Look, the Guri, as she is called, is the sexy henchman to the sexy crime lord.
It's a sexy group. All right,
It's a sexy group. It's true.
Black Sun is a sexy group.
Well, and in this comic, thank God, doesn't get into the whole weird, like, pheromone thing that's going on with Prachizor.
Oh, my God. By the way, I got to say, I don't know if you saw this in your research, but the original mandate from Lucasfilm, of all places, was Gizor should get it on with Leia.
Yeah.
And Steve Perry was the one who was like, I won't do that because the fans are going to come after me about that.
Yeah.
Smart, man. He goes, whose name is on the book, right? Who's going to get the fucking letters about that?
No, smart move, because, look, he's already, like, real rapey in certain parts of the book.
If he actually banged Leia, and that would have been that would have been the thing that that this book was remembered for forever in the worst way.
Yeah. And, like, it skirts that line sometimes. It absolutely does.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there's a whole thing going on with his species, the feline, that are, like, they produce, like, these intense pheromones that trigger attraction in mammals. And he's a lizard man, so he doesn't feel those ways. He's a cold-blooded, merciless killer, but he does enjoy the company of females from time to time.
Which is, like, just as a thing that's acknowledged, is like a creepy trait of a villain. When you actually start putting that into plot, you're like, ugh.
I mean, it's right. It rides that line with, like, Scaramanga, right? Where it's like, he has to have sex right before he kills somebody.
Just before the kill, Gurgani, as the theme song indicates.
Yeah.
I don't know how they snuck that one in past everyone. But
we've got Guri coming along here. She is a hot blonde lady who, I don't think they actually address this in the comic. She's a robot.
They definitely don't. She's just around. This is where the comic being an offshoot of the novel, the way that we're just like, and of course, Guri, and you're just like, who? The same thing with when they mentioned Dash Rendar at a certain point too. You're like, who? I know because I read the book, but like if you weren't, you would just be like, what? You're acting like these are just known Star Wars characters. Gizor at least gets like some setup of like, oh, that guy, you know. Then he's got these people around him, and they go like, yes, girly, that thing, and you're like, who is this?
Because he's telling her to go contact Jabba the Hutt, tell him that I want to confer with him here immediately. So this guy's such a big deal, he can get Jabba the Hutt to drag his ass to Coruscant.
Which prior to this, in the canon of Star Wars, that guy was as big a crime boss as we had ever seen.
Yeah, and like after this time, especially during like the Disney reset, we sort of like reset the table on the Hutts and make them a little bit more of a bigger deal in the crime underworld.
Yeah, they're a crime family, basically, right? Like,
Well, the Clone Wars has the whole like council of crime lord Hutts that we meet.
Some of which are better than others.
Some of which are better than others, yes. The less said about Capote the Hutt, the better.
Oh, come on. Yeah, but come on. All right. Weirdest character. And then, yes, then we get him being evil in his own head.
Yes, Vader, I am dangerous, especially if you hope to deliver young Skywalker to the Emperor alive. Skywalker. His next move will be to rescue Solo, little hero that he is. It is a wise hunter who remains a step ahead of his quarry.
Yeah, that is, we read him in exactly the same way, which is like, yes, Skywalker. I mean, literally, look at his steepled fingers in that panel. Yeah. I'm contemplating evil deeds.
I am scheming. This is my scheming face.
And then we cut to Slave One, which, by the way, have they actually eliminated Slave One as the name of the ship in Canada? No. Okay. At least on the toys now, it's just called Boba Fett's ship.
On a specific Lego set, it's called that.
Oh, is it just the one? Okay, good.
As far as I know, yeah.
Because I thought that was stupid when that whole thing was going.
Yeah, I think the Lego Corporation, in their infinite wisdom, decided to not print the word Slave 1 on a Lego set.
Okay. And we fucking lost our minds about it.
Some people did, sure. I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the thing. My reaction was more just like, well, it's still going to be called Slave 1 no matter what you do, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, other Lego sets have, like, Anakin's starship, Luke's X-Wing.
Okay, there you go, yeah.
Ahsoka's starship.
All right.
Like,
Well, you answered my question, then. Great. Anyway, cut to Slave 1.
yeah, okay, here's where I start getting some rocky patches with this comic book. Because so far, like, okay, we get some Rogue Squadron stuff, we get some Empire intrigue, fine. Mm-hmm. When we get to monologuing Boba Fett is where I start running into trouble.
Yeah, like, who's he talking to when he says...
Literally no... Well, okay, actually, who he's talking to here...
Space, entering the Tatooine system.
Yeah, imagine this all in a slightly... Yeah, a slightly New Zealand brogue.
Georgia trip Solo. Next stop, Jabba the Hutt. Like,
we cut to this next page, and who he's talking to is just the frozen body of Han Solo.
He's gonna pay well for you. You see, Solo, you're not just a prisoner. You're more than that. You're a work of art. This dude's insane.
We get 4 whole panels of him just talking at Han Solo's frozen body.
This is my favorite. Not alive, not dead, frozen in a moment of time. Man in carbonite, a masterpiece by Darth Vader. Oh yes, Jabba will pay dear to put you in his collection. He's nuts. He's fucking nuts.
This Boba Fett is an insane person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, this is so... Boba Fett always just steely, only speaks a few times for just quick sort of, yeah, that's right. Sort of, that's how... And then here he's just like, oh yes, look at...
Boba Fett's most famous line before this, he's no good to me dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that. And here he's just talking to a frozen Han Solo and just going, oh yeah, that's right, yeah. And he's like, oh, so Boba Fett has space madness from this trip, I guess. What the fuck happened to this guy?
Again, I think the better Boba Fett comics will not come out until after this book.
No, yeah.
There's Enemy of the Empire is the whole like Boba Fett, Darth Vader like mix 'em up that happens that I really like.
Well, we're prime in the era, and we're definitely of that era of we're in the generation that loves Boba Fett because we grew up on all the books and comics that made him the giant badass the movies only imply.
Right, exactly. I'm trying to look up right now. When did War of the Bounty Hunters come out? Those novels.
I think before that, maybe? Is my guess.
I just saw that actually that Barnes & Noble just put out a really gorgeous one of those like collector hardcovers that they do. That is of all 3 of those books. Yeah, and it's got like Boba Fett's mask emblazoned on the front. It's very cool. Yeah.
You would not have expected that.
I know, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
But anyway, yeah, Boba Fett as a character, not super solidified.
No, this is nuts. And then it's like, what the hell's going on here? There's a security alert. And
it looks like something is some kind of signal beacon is activated on the lower hold. So still monologuing to himself, Boba Fett scrambles downstairs. It must have been planted while I was on Cloud City. Set to trip. The Slave 1 entered Tatooine space. No time to search for it. I must neutralize the whole area as he flamethrowers the whole lower deck of his ship.
Insane. This guy's like, no time. Because once again, he's like, just burn. I'm going to set my own ship on fire. Because I'm see. The writers decided I'm unhinged now. Yeah, and so he just lights the lower section of the fire, and then he's like, and then I'll just put it out up here. Then he continues the next several pages. He's just yapping and yapping to no one.
Okay, so yeah, the Mandalorian Armor, the first book of the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy, which is like in my head like the definitive why I thought Boba Fett was cool after the fact novels.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Those are the ones where like Boba Fett survives with the help of Dengar and goes on a whole adventure. But anyway, that novel isn't published until '98, so after this.
Okay, so it is after this. Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah. So he's not yet. He's still just all potentially cool at this point.
Well, and setting his own ship on fire, and then he puts out the fire.
Yeah.
But then, what's this? More alerts as he's continuing to just talk to himself. I might have known. They'd try to move in on you, Solo. They know you're here now, but where are they?
He's almost just, nobody's getting my precious boy. He's all mine. And what is
slowly petting the frozen face of Han Solo?
Yeah. Oh, shit. It's... No mistaking the outline. IG-2000. No, IG-2000.
Is the name of IG-88 spaceship.
Yeah, you gotta love that. And he's just like... and so, yeah, it's IG-88. So now he's arguing with a robot.
Well, he's still only talking to himself. He's not
That's
talking to...
That's true, isn't it? I just realized
Property of assassin droid IG-88, a bounty hunter who fancies himself my equal.
Here's the thing. Make this a thought bubble, and I don't have a problem.
I know.
And they've already done a bunch of internal monologue, but they're like, no, Boba Fett, famously crazy dude. Yeah.
Famously ranting to himself and nobody else.
That's like his most defining quality, right? That he's just like a rambling maniac. I've seen movies, right? Yeah, anyway.
What's this? The spaceship was a decoy, and coming out of hyperspace from behind, it's another IG-2000.
I gotta say, too, this comic's all over the place. Like, just the way it's like, it was about Luke, then it was about Wedge, then it was about Vader, now it's all of a sudden we're cutting to Boba Fett.
To be fair, this is the chunk of the story that explains why Boba Fett doesn't just go straight to Tatooine, is this comic right here.
Yeah, that's true. Because IG-88 made a play for Han Solo.
Yeah, and
that
something that
was specifically tipped off by Xizor.
Yeah, probably.
Well, because he has that line to Giru about, did you contact the bounty hunters?
Yeah, and tell them like, oh, he's probably heading to Tatooine. So yeah, in all probability,
so this is part of his grand scheme.
Sure.
Even though. That's weird because he's like, I know Luke's going to make a play for Solo, so if you know Solo's going to shouldn't you just go to Tatooine? Why would you want to derail that then?
Well, I mean, IG-88 wouldn't be leaving Tatooine if he succeeded here. He'd be going to Jabba, right?
Yes, so I guess it doesn't matter. But just like, but what does it matter if Boba Fett goes there too? I don't know.
Because he's too cool. We got to get him out of the picture.
Yeah. Just send that dumb robot one.
Even Prince Xizor knows, like, oh no, Boba Fett, he's way too radical. We can't have him flying around in there.
Yeah. He might ruin things. Yeah, so, all right. So, Skridium says the title, says the sound effect.
Yeah, and we get one of Slave One's wings shot off, and IG-88 begins monologuing now.
Oh, also another character famous for chatter.
Do yourselves a favor. You can't play the Shadows of the Empire game. It's almost impossible to play these days.
Right, yeah, we were talking about that, which is weird.
Yeah, before there's like some weird things where it's like the PC version is damn near unplayable. If you can find a ROM of the N64 version, you can probably still play it. Or if you even own the original N64 version, probably still playable. N64s tend not to break.
Right.
But there is a boss fight with IG-88 in that game, and he has one of the dumbest monologues I've ever heard a droid given in the Star Wars universe. It's pretty great.
He doesn't speak in Empire at any point.
No.
He's just there.
No.
Because I had that thought when he spoke here. I went, what does he sound like?
He sounds like a droid.
Yeah.
Boba Fett, surrender your prisoner, and you have 30% probability of surviving this encounter.
Because I'm going like, well, he's not going to sound like Taika, because that was IG-11. And I don't think they all have the same voice. So yeah, he is. It's crazy.
Yeah, in the video game, he specifically says, like, well, I am going to kill you anyway, so I might as well reveal the plan of what just happened. Like, verbatim, he says that.
Of course he does. And then once again, he's like, yes, he is good, the droid, but he's a problem. Destroy me and he may lose you too, Solo. He's still talking fucking Frozen Huns. This guy's out of control.
Yeah. So then he hits the... Boba Fett hits the power brakes of his spaceship.
Yep.
Inertial dampeners on. And he screeches backwards, because that's how space works.
Pulls a Darcy and Hutch move and does the emergency brake to spin the car.
Yeah. So that he can, like, now be behind IG-88 and open fire on him.
Yeah.
And we get a whole page, a dialogueless page, actually, of him pulling off this maneuver, which I thought was bold, considering Boba Fett had been monologuing nonstop for the last 3 pages.
It really undoes this comic's depiction of the character, but it's refreshing from the 80s comics we've been reading, where they just, had everybody talking all the time, or there was narration. It's nice to see a comic just carry action on a page.
Yeah, it's really weird reading a book with 0 caption boxes.
Yeah. Even though
based on what we've been reading up till now.
I was gonna say, yeah, even though that's most comics we read now. Yeah. And you know what? I like that better.
Yeah, and then Boba Fett lines up the shot, and he blows up IG-88. I'm sure we'll never see him again.
Yeah, I was wondering. Well, the nice thing about IG-88 being a droid, right, is that you're just like, you can kill him off and then be like, oh, but what you don't know is his memory core was backed up to this other body.
There's even, like, it gets so wild in the Legends novels to a point where I believe there is a short story in which IG-88's programming is uploaded to the second Death Star.
Why not?
Sure.
Why not?
Because why not?
No, the more you talk, I understand there are people that love those books, but the more you start talking about stuff like that, the more like, of course Disney had to. Are you kidding me? Well, because it is sort of it's kind of an all or none situation on those. Yeah. And actually what they're doing is, of course, very smart, which is they're just like, and then we're sort of taking concepts and reinventing them. Or
totally.
Hot take: Disney's doing a good job.
The fact that that's a hot take is what makes me sad.
It frustrates me to no end because, like the amount of good Star Wars we have now outweighs the bad Star Wars. Like, not even close. All right. So, damage report. And then Han Solo. No. No, I wanted Han Solo to tell me how the ship's doing.
So, then Boba Fett continues to monologue to himself and the frozen body of Han Solo that basically says, like, well, I'm already at Tatooine, but I can't land here because as soon as I land, I'm a dead man. So I got to go find a place to repair my ship.
Can I say my favorite drawing here is the deep focus shot of the frozen hand of Han Solo in the carbonite as Boba Fett looks back at him and goes, "It appears we'll be keeping each other company for a while longer, Solo."
Here's the meet cute that I want. A frozen coffee table Han Solo and a merciless, rambling bounty hunter.
Sorry, Jobber. I found something I never expected out there. Love.
Can these two crazy kids make it work in a galaxy far, far away?
One's a Mandalorian bounty hunter. The other's a smuggler encased in a slab of carbonite. They said it'd never work.
Do they have a fireball's chance on Hoth to make it through this?
Oh my god. It's amazing. This is weird.
But that is the end of the first issue.
I gotta say, the Marvel app really does the Dark Horse comics dirty, because we ran into this when we were doing the Infinities as well. These things just stop. There's no way. They had a little bit more, like they at least had like a closing page or something, right? When these were,
you'd have like your letters pages and like your background stuff.
No, but they're just like, boom, it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be doing something as we proceed through this story, because we're in for the long haul here. We got 6 issues of this book to cover. I want to track how far we get in this book versus where it is in the story of the novel and where it is in the story of the video game as we're tracking this.
Yeah.
So at least where the novel is concerned, we haven't even started.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. You said this is all set up, right? Basically.
Yeah, basically. The events of the novel kick off with all of our main characters on Tatooine, waiting for Boba Fett to show up, and then he never shows up, and then they leave.
Brilliant.
As far as the video game is concerned, the video game starts with Dash Rendar on the Battle of Hoth, so we're already into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the video game is very bizarre. There are some huge time jumps in the game that are filled in by both this book and the novel. And Dash Rendar is kind of the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in one of this guy who's just sort of like, he's there for all the events. Don't worry about it.
We just needed another guy.
Yeah. Basically.
Yeah, we got to put another guy in here. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where we're at with Shadows of the Empire. The table is set as a story of intrigue and shadows is played out across the Star Wars universe.
Nobody's taken my carbonite boyfriend from me.
And honestly, that is sort of going to be the story of this comic book, because this comic definitely focuses more on Boba Fett than, because he's mentioned in the novel. He is a boss fight and little else in the video game.
Well, I feel like that was Dark Horse going like, perfect then. We can tell the Boba Fett story. He sells a lot of books, folks. Yeah.
We're deep into Shadows of the Empire. I cannot wait to continue this story. This is like kind of peak Star Wars, at least for me and my like personal Star Wars growth.
Sure. I mean, like I said, this is like 96, 97, that time pre-prequels is I have a lot of nostalgia for as well. When it's like we just had the trilogy and stuff like this, and I was, rabid for the franchise at that point. So this is when, in elementary school, every notebook, backpack, everything I had was Star Wars at this point. So,
and I think we're going to be looking at this book through a critical lens, because we're now like reading it with fresh eyes as we're trying to strip away a little bit of the nostalgia. But the nostalgia is still going to be there and is going to taint our coverage of this, I feel like.
Nostalgia for it. I do also recognize it's, particularly this comic, it's not good. I can't speak to the novel, but the comic is not good.
The Perry novel is fine.
Yeah.
I think it's written interestingly, and that's what I can say about it.
Say certainly none of it lives up to the hype that was built around it by any stretch of the imagination.
Right, and you listen to the soundtrack and you're just like, yeah, Star Wars.
Well,
you read the comic and go, yeah, Star Wars.
Yeah, well, because the music can always sell you, right? Like Star Wars is just so grand, and the sounds of it are so epic and exciting. You're never not just hit by that. Like, yeah, we're in it, man. Anyway, if you want more of this or more from us talking about other stuff and all the things we do on the network, you can head over to our Patreon page, which is patreon.podbean.com/punchup. Like I said, you get cool exclusive bonus content and help support the shows.
Yes, indeed. And of course, one of the better ways to support the shows is by going over to our YouTube page, and you can find all of the stuff that John just mentioned there as well. YouTube.com/@PunchUpEntertainment. One of the best ways to enjoy this show is to do it over on our YouTube page, because you can read the comic along with us. But there you can also find all sorts of YouTube-specific content, because we just have Punch Up Plays rolling along now. We have John's interview series. We have Punch Up Goes to the Movies, as well as plenty of other fun stuff you can find there. And while you're there, please like, comment, subscribe. Let us know in the comments below, where were you when Shadows of the Empire happened? I'd be so curious to know, somebody who is maybe like on the younger side, if you're maybe coming to this experience just now with us, like what is your opinion on something like Shadows of the Empire as a gestalt media entity that exists without a movie at its center? Very curious to know.
Indeed.
But I think that's going to do it for us this week. As always, I have been Mike Rigoni.
I'm John Campbell.
And as always, may the panel be with you.